Alright, so I'm going to start by going over our raid composition first. We had 3 healers out of our total 12-player raid, and the standard 2 tanks. And what we did with our raid was we split it up, as you can see over on the left, so that we had 2 healers going with 1 tank and 4 DPS, and 1 healer going with the other tank and the remaining 3 DPS. And the reason we split it up like this is, as I will explain later, the one tank who's tanking Foreman Feldspar gets to have 2 healers healing him because Foreman Feldspar does a little bit of extra damage, and the other side doesn't have Foreman Feldspar, so it's only got the 1 tank and healer. Now, the first thing I want to talk about after our raid composition is the mobs that you will encounter in Phase 1 of this fight. I'm going to start off with the Bellows Operator, who I'm currently targeting. And this is the mob that is the DPS priority in this phase. You want to be DPSing these above all other targets, and you want to bring them down as quickly as possible. You can cleave the other targets while you're DPSing them, but you really want to kill these guys as quickly as possible. And the reason for that is, as you can see over on the right, next to the Heart of Mountain, there's a little energy bar. It's called Heat, and as the heat increases, the boss uses a raid-wide AoE damage spell more frequently. So you really want to be killing these guys as quickly as possible because they increase the heat of the boss and cause him to deal more raid-wide AoE damage more frequently. So that's bad. After you kill the Bellows Operator, the next priority is Furnace Engineers. Furnace Engineers have an ability to repair the heat regulators, which are the objects you can see right over here on my right, and there's one on each side. And when these are destroyed, that pushes you into Phase 2, so you really don't want the Furnace Engineers to be repairing them. Also, the Furnace Engineers will randomly throw bombs on members of your raid occasionally, and upon dying, will drop a sack of bombs that contains 3 bombs within it to be looted by your players. When a bomb is thrown on you, or when you loot one, you have about 15 seconds until it detonates. You also gain an extra action button, so you can detonate it early if you so choose to do so. So the Furnace Engineers should be going down after the Bellows Operators. The security guards should primarily be ignored. All they really have is the one ability you can see over here on the left, where they throw down a shield and it creates a purple circle. Mobs within that circle gain 99% damage resistance. With the exception of Bellow Operators, the buff doesn't affect Bellows Operators, and it also doesn't affect Primal Elementalists. Now, as you can see, we just destroyed that heat regulator on the right, and the heat regulator on the left is at about 20% HP. Now, the important thing to do in this phase is really to control when your last heat regulator gets destroyed, because adds will be spawning. A new Bellows Operator will spawn every minute, along with some additional adds, and every 30 seconds in between that minute, some other little adds will also spawn. And the important thing about this phase is you don't want to leave this phase and go into Phase 2 while you still have a lot of adds up. So you really want to be leaving this phase right before the next wave of adds spawns. So after a Bellows Operator spawns, you want to kill it, and then wait as long as you possibly can right before that next 1 minute expires, and then destroy your last heat regulator and force Phase 2. So as you can see, I got the stopwatch here, and it's ticking up to 148, and pretty soon we're going to call to destroy that last heat regulator, and there, it just went down. So now we're into Phase 2. If we had waited 5 more seconds from now, we would have gotten another wave of adds spawned, and we would have gone into Phase 2 with a bunch of adds that would have done a lot of damage to us, and those combined with the mechanics of Phase 2 probably would have caused a wipe. So, now that we're in Phase 2, the first objective is to cleave down all of the adds that were left over from Phase 1. Mostly it's going to be security guards, maybe a few Furnace Engineers, and Foreman Feldspar. Foreman Feldspar isn't too much of a threat. He does some extra damage to the tank, which is why we had 2 healers healing the tank that was tanking him. And he also puts debuffs on random raid members that when the debuff expires, it creates this little slag pool you can see over on the left. Those are created when the debuff falls off you from Foreman Feldspar. Basically, you just have to move out of them, and they're not too big a deal. Next, I'm going to talk about the mechanics that you'll experience in Phase 2, and I'm going to start by going over the mobs you're going to see. You're going to see Primal Elementalists, Slag Elementals, you're going to see Fire Callers, and Security Guards will still occasionally spawn as well. Like in Phase 1, the security guards are primarily ignored. You may want to tank them away from any mobs that you're trying to kill, as if they put their damage buff up, then it's going to be hard to kill those mobs. However, their damage buff, or their armor buff, doesn't affect the Primal Elementalists, so you don't have to be worried about moving them off the Primal Elementalists, as it doesn't work on them. So, the mechanics of how this phase works is you have 4 Primal Elementalists, one of whom we just killed, and they are naturally immune to damage. Now, the way to remove their damage immunity is to destroy a slag elemental near them. When a slag elemental dies, it does AoE damage in about a 5-yard radius around it, and this will hurt you, so you should move away, but it will also remove the shield on the Primal Elementalist. Now, slag elementals fixate random raid players when they spawn, so whoever they are fixating has to stand next to the Primal Elementalist, and then people with interrupts have to interrupt the slag elementals, as their only ability is to cast Burn, which is a ranged fire attack. So when they're interrupted, they will run towards whoever they're fixating, and if that person is standing on top of a Primal Elementalist, then you will get the slag elemental near the Primal Elementalist. Once it's near, stop interrupting it so that it just stands stationary, and DPS it down. When it's about to die, move out of melee range of it, it'll explode, remove the shield from the Primal Elementalist, and then you'll have about 30 seconds to kill the Primal Elementalist before he'll put his shield back on. Now, while his shield is down, he will attempt to cast a heal on himself. It goes in the form of a buff, and it can be purged or dispelled. And other than that, he doesn't do anything else. Another important thing to watch out for, though, when you're DPSing your Primal Elementalist, is Fire Callers. Fire Callers are by themselves not too dangerous. They have a debuff they put on several random raid members called Volatile Fire, which after a certain duration will expire and cause AoE damage around the player who's debuffed with it, so you have to spread out when you get this debuff. But what the Fire Callers also can do is cast a spell called Cauterize on Primal Elementalists and heal them for a significant portion of their health. So if you're DPSing a Primal Elementalist, which Primal Elementalists are your top priority in this phase, as killing all 4 of them will force you into Phase 3, and some Fire Callers are alive, it's best to pay attention to them and make sure you interrupt them if they try to cast Cauterize. Otherwise, what you want to be doing is killing a Primal Elementalist if his shield is down, killing a Slag Elemental if you don't have a Primal Elementalist who has a shield down, and cleaning up any Fire Callers in between while you're still trying to kite the Slag Elementals to stand near the Primal Elementalists, as the Fire Callers do a noticeable amount of raid damage, and it's best to clean them up when you have the opportunity. Now shortly here we will be killing the last Primal Elementalist, the 4th one, and this will put us into Phase 3, the final phase. You may have noticed that we lusted right at the start of the encounter, and we did that so that we could kill the Bellows operators as quickly as possible. Now, this encounter takes a long time, and as you may notice, our lust debuff is getting down to about 3 minutes, and it will be back up before we finish this fight. But what you really have to focus on in this phase is primarily positioning. The boss will put a melt debuff on players, which, similar to Foreman Feldspar's debuff, will spawn an AoE zone at your feet when it expires. However, different from Foreman Feldspar's debuff, it grows rapidly in size and deals significantly more damage. So we've moved back into this corner here at the start of Phase 3, and our plan is to try to drop as many zones as we can in the corner and then work our way around the extents of the room, as these melt zones basically function as the soft enrage on this boss. If you place them poorly and run out of room, then you're going to be standing in pools that deal 50k damage per second to you, and you're going to wipe really quickly. So if you don't go into the corner and place these pools wisely, you're going to end up running out of room and dying. Now, this phase is significantly intensive on heals on the tanks. They take a lot of damage. They also get a debuff on them from the boss, and the method to deal with the debuff is to taunt at 2 stacks. They actually get 2 debuffs, but one of the debuffs doesn't go away, and the other one you want to taunt at 2 stacks. So that's all there really is to this fight. If you place your melt zones in a somewhat decent fashion, and as you can see we're ticking down to about 50 seconds from Lust, you just have to stay on the move, use good tank heals, pop your cooldowns, and the tanks have to taunt it too. And once you get to this phase, the boss isn't too hard, and you should have no problem downing him. That's all. I'm just going to put some music on for the remainder of this fight to entertain you.